Well, it's still October, and I'm still playing some horror games. So I found the beast inside. The premise is something like, you move into this house in the countryside with your pregnant wife, and you work for a spy agency. And this weird shit starts to happen where you're being spied on. That's the premise. But honestly, it didn't take long for my opinion of this game to start to sour. Right from the first few hours of the game, I was thinking to myself, is most of this game going to be spent outside in broad daylight doing menial tasks? The answer is unfortunately yes. What were they thinking? Why is there a horror game where most of it is spent outside in broad daylight? I mean, maybe in some sense that can work, but it just wasn't working here. The way the game works is like this. You play one chapter in present day, wandering around outside, doing ordinary literal chores like talking to your wife, painting the walls, going to get things from your shed, going into the attic to find something, bringing boxes upstairs, literally just walking around, talking to your wife and doing housework. Or, if you get a few hours into the game, instead of going around your house, you instead wander around the forest behind your house, doing this really awful, tedious, sci-fi looking tracking device section, where you have to stare at some mini screen and follow its signal and then scan the areas for clues, as well as randomly having to do this stupid, bizarre minigame where you shoot anomalies in the sky with your sci-fi gun beams. I mean, what? It's so goddamn stupid. All this shit just feels like a massive chore and a waste of time. Pretty disappointing. It's like you do one ordinary present day chapter, and then the next chapter is like the actual horror chapter. You wake up in the past, like 17th century, as some alternate version of yourself, and then finally you wander around in the dark in these old houses or inns or mines, getting jump scared and having spooky atmosphere. This is how the game always operates. You do one ordinary broad daylight chapter, and then the next chapter afterwards is always in the past and it's dark and horror. So like half of the game is menial chores and just boring tedium, and the other half is finally the horror game. Why the hell did they do it like this? It operates this way for all of the 13 chapters. And let me tell you, every single broad daylight present day chapter is a total fucking slog and complete boring bullshit. The first half of them, like I said, you literally do nothing but menial house chores and talking to your wife, or doing some awful overly complex puzzles that make you stare at cryptic journals and scrolls for 30 minutes straight before you figure it out. Or you wander around the backwoods of your house doing more boring bullshit like turning off power lines or using your stupid little sci-fi gun scanner to follow some trail. There's like zero interesting moments in these chapters. The game is so damn boring. I was thinking to myself, what the hell am I playing frequently? Why do I have to do these boring, broad daylight bullshit chapters where nothing happens? You just walk around and mumble bullshit to yourself with god-awful voice acting that sounds so bad you'll either be cringing or laughing at how silly it sounds. You can clearly tell the voice actor is hastily reading off a page, sitting in the vocal booth, without even using proper commas. It sounds so janky. And they constantly swear, and it sounds so unnatural and stupid. It's just terrible voice acting.
Emma? Can you hear me? Emma?
I was calling you before, but you wouldn't even answer. Where have you been?
I was snooping around the attic. I found this
The power is out, by the way.
diary. What?
A fuse must have blown. Be a darling, go to the basement and fix it before it gets dark. This place needs a lot of work. The sooner we start, the better. I don't have to tell you that, do I?
The game is basically a clone of Amnesia. You have the exact same control scheme, where you walk up to objects in the environment, and a hand appears, and you use some sort of physics system to move the objects around. But it's just not as well done in this game. The controls feel clunky and janky, and something about the mouse movement just feels off. Even with the mouse sensitivity cranked, you still have to swing your arm, like a jackass, to do anything or operate any of the levers or tools or whatever shit you have to do. It feels awkward and not as it should. It even has some of the same puzzles as Amnesia Rebirth, such as the mine, where you have to go and push a cart into the wall. Okay, so half the chapters, you're doing menial housework in broad daylight, talking to your wife about bullshit, or wandering around in the woods in broad daylight with zero horror, with zero scary atmosphere. So what about the horror chapters in between? Yes, these are definitely better and more interesting. You spend them at night in old Victorian places, playing as some sort of alternate version of yourself. You talk differently, and you're recounting some events of this top hat guy that goes around killing people, but he saves you. Look, the story is terrible. The character models, voice acting, and writing just feel so amateur and low budget. The wife character model looks something straight out of some Unity asset store. It looks like an asset flip or some shit. The character models look terrible. The graphics in general aren't awful, it's got some impressive lighting and specular effects, but overall the game just looks extremely generic and bland, like something default in Unreal Engine. It has no character or soul. It's not as graphically impressive or polished as other similar games. For example, objects in the environment frequently won't react to you. Like if you run into a hanging chain, it stays a static object instead of moving, things like that. The environment is mostly static. Right, so the horror chapters, things are a bit more interesting. Another reason it's an Amnesia Rebirth clone in particular is because you even have the same matches and lantern system, and lighting candles on the wall in the exact same way. Though this mechanic is incredibly trivial, because I barely felt any need to use it, and by the end of the game I had like 100 matches and dozens of lantern refills. The game isn't that dark, even on the lowest gamma settings. But yeah, in these horror chapters, it's the typical stuff. Walking around old houses and hearing creepy noises. Mostly the only forms of horror you're gonna get are jump scares of this white ghost-looking thing crawling fast at you, or jumping at you briefly, at least for the first half of the game. But as the game progresses, you start to have to actually avoid enemies, where you get a bunch of these run sections, where the enemies keep popping up left and right, and in front of you, and you have to think quick and take different paths. But this quickly becomes trial and error bullshit, and the game really has long loading screens, so dying and doing trial and error gets old quick. But yeah, some of the atmosphere in the horror sections are pretty decent, at least early on. There's not all that many memorable moments in the horror chapters, unfortunately. You don't come across any gruesome sights all that often. A few times you see a corpse here and there, but it's nothing shocking and you'll forget about it quickly. The game is just incredibly boring and generic, nothing stands out. Towards the end of the game, you'll be doing this mine section, where you go underground and have to find your way through this maze, where it keeps getting reset unless you take the right path. This was an absolute fucking slog, because you're getting chased by a monster the whole time, and you'll be dying and reloading a lot. Like, you know that part in Mario 64 with the endless staircase? It's like that, except you have to take the right paths to get out, and you have a note in your inventory that you have to keep opening and staring at to figure out which path to go down. It's just an absolute chore. It's scary the first like 1 to 3 times, but having to do it over and over like 20 times just started to be a massive pain in the ass. Fuck that part. Then afterwards, you get to a swamp area, where again, it's trying to clone something from Amnesia, The Dark Descent, the monster in the water part, and you can't touch the water for too long, or you get eaten. Yeah, I found this part pretty annoying too, but it wasn't as bad as the mine. Then right after, you go into a house with this old witch lady, and you have to sneak around and grab the key from off her, but she keeps chasing you. And yeah, this part was a lot of trial and error bullshit too. Like, it's not terrible. I get that horror games need to have stuff like this, but I don't know, the stealth system is just extremely bare bones. You can't hide anywhere. It just plays a sound when you're spotted, and the music ends when you're safe, and that's really it. So you do a lot of snapping in between this modern day and old time eras, trying to follow some story about commies spying on us. No, really, he keeps saying fucking commies. So apparently the main character is a spy, and he's being followed by communist spies, but also some shit about family drama and your father and your child. But really, it's just a total snooze fest. Plus the characters and voice acting are so laughably stupid and cringe I could hardly give a shit. By the end of the game, it's revealed that you murdered your wife because you thought she was a spy, because you're in a mental hospital and you're going mad with paranoia. But that could just be the bad ending, I don't know or really care. The main antagonist isn't scary or shocking or threatening at all. It's just some idiot in a top hat. Kinda lame. Like I said, this thing where you keep snapping in and out of the modern day and the past with each chapter is just such a stupid design choice. At least in the modern sections it should have had some horror or atmosphere, but no. It's just this really boring detective simulator, except the gameplay is really dull, and you barely do anything. There are frequent extremely cryptic puzzles, where every time I saw one of them, I just went, ugh, not this shit again. Because I knew I had some labor over some cryptic bullshit for dozens of minutes. It's just not fun. By the end of the game, I looked up the answer to one of these puzzles because I just didn't want to do it anymore and I wanted the game to be over. Oh yeah, and it's also a relatively long game compared to other horror games in the genre. Most games in this genre, you can finish in like 2 to 6 hours. This one took me over 9 hours to complete, which isn't good because at least half of the game sucks, and the other half is mostly bad, with a few decent moments and atmosphere. At least it's slightly better than Amnesia Rebirth, because at least this one takes place in a variety of different locations. And it doesn't make you go to sci-fi stupid alien spaceship lands, and you don't play as this overly whiny, obnoxious pregnant woman the whole game, and it doesn't take place in the desert, but in a Victorian Gothic era. So I guess if their main inspiration was Amnesia Rebirth, well, I guess they slightly outdid them, and the devs can compliment themselves on a job well done, but the game is still horrible. 4 out of 10.
if I can't help you, I'll pester you with questions. Have they called you from work yet?
No.
And did you give them our new number?
Honey, it's the government. They even know the angle you're tilting your head at.
Gives me the creeps. Ever thought about doing something other than, cryptanalysis? I mean, before you joined the CIA?
Like what?
Like, something that doesn't come with being responsible for millions of lives. Some job without all the spies, agents, and double agents lurking behind your back. Without the constant feeling that you can't trust anyone.
Not really. Besides...